What unfolds when a flight attendant challenges a reserved man's freedom to wear a simple cross around his neck, without realizing this man is Leonardo DiCaprio? What started as a subtle act of judgment aimed at a small silver crucifix became a defining moment that shook an entire flight. By the time the plane landed, no one could forget what he said or how he said it. Oh, and before we take off, let us know where you're watching this from. We love seeing your reactions. The main concourse at Los Angeles International Airport was alive with its usual frenzy. Travelers hurried in every direction. Kids dragged brightly colored suitcases, and executives typed intensely on their phones while keeping an eye on departure boards. Amid that bustle, one individual moved at a steady, almost unhurried pace. Dressed in a plain black t-shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers, no designer watch, no flashy adornments, no bodyguards clearing the path. He was Leonardo DiCaprio. A few people gave him curious looks, a flicker of, could it be, crossing their faces, but most didn't recognize him. He passed by like any other passenger, perhaps seeming slightly out of place in such a polished environment. However, one detail stood out in his understated appearance. Around his neck, hanging loosely, was a small silver crucifix that gently glimmered under the airport lights. It wasn't large or ostentatious, yet it carried a distinct presence, something heavier than its modest size implied. Leonardo moved ahead without conceit, without hiding, simply existing as himself. Reaching the first-class gate, he stepped into the priority line and handed over his ticket to the flight attendant on duty. His name was clearly displayed, but the woman in front of him, poised posture, impeccable uniform, sharp gaze, hesitated for a moment. "Sir," she said, glancing at his ticket and then back at him, a slight wrinkle on her brow. "I believe you're in the wrong line. First-class board's here." Leonardo didn't look surprised or offended. He answered with a calm smile. "I'm in the right place." The attendant, whose name tag read Carla, examined the ticket again. It was valid. The name was correct. She knew who Leonardo DiCaprio was, of course, yet she hadn't initially recognized him. His casual look, worn sneakers, and absence of any celebrity aura didn't fit the usual first-class profile. Even though his credentials were confirmed, she hesitated. A quiet bias had already surfaced. She let him through, but her eyes stayed on him, uneasy. He walked slowly down the jetway and settled into his first-class seat with practiced ease, like someone who had done this many times. But Carla kept her gaze on him. Something about him bothered her. Maybe it was the contrast between his relaxed style and the extravagance she usually expected. Or it could have been the crucifix, now plainly visible as he fastened his seatbelt. She momentarily froze, staring at the small symbol, a flicker of tension crossing her expression. Without a word, she took a step forward, then another, following him with deliberate, almost rehearsed strides. Something inside her had shifted. She let him board, but upon spotting the crucifix on his chest, she froze momentarily. Her demeanor changed, becoming more serious and calculated. The aircraft's gentle hum was nearly soothing as it climbed into the sky. Below them, the world was a haze of clouds and sunlit rooftops. Inside the first-class cabin, the air was cool, and the lights were softened just enough to suggest comfort without enforcing sleep. Leonardo sat quietly, arms on the padded armrests, breathing slow and measured. He wasn't reading or watching anything. He was simply being in the silence. His presence drew more attention than noise ever could. The silver crucifix around his neck had shifted slightly during takeoff, now resting squarely atop his plain shirt. It wasn't gleaming or freshly polished. In fact, it appeared somewhat aged, edges worn, like it had weathered many chapters of life. Yet that modest piece of metal seemed to carry a weight beyond its size. From the galley, Carla peered down the aisle to keep an eye on him. Something about his composure, calm, self-assured, unapologetically himself, unsettled her, and she couldn't quite say why. She had handled celebrities before, the loud, the demanding, the entitled. But Leonardo didn't fit any of those descriptions. Still, something about him, or maybe the necklace, stirred an unspoken unease in her. Moments later, she approached him with a practiced poise, the kind she'd fine-tuned in front of mirrors, in training sessions, and in her own thoughts whenever she faced tricky situations. This wasn't merely a flight. It was her realm, and she aimed to preserve its order. "Sir," she began softly, I want to remind you that our airline maintains guidelines about overt religious symbols in shared cabins, particularly here in first class. We ask everyone to use discretion. Leonardo turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry. Did I violate a rule? Her tone remained gentle, but an underlying edge emerged. It's not about a specific rule. We aim to keep a neutral environment. Some passengers might find certain symbols uncomfortable. He glanced down at the crucifix. I've flown like this countless times. I've never been told it was an issue. She hesitated, not expecting that answer. Well, times change. Some travelers are more sensitive now. We just request consideration. Maybe you could tuck it under your shirt. She made a vague motion toward his necklace, as though reluctant to point directly at it, as if it might burn her fingers. Leonardo responded without anger, but didn't comply either. This crucifix isn't a fashion choice or a provocation. It's part of me. Carla forced a polite smile, one intended to diffuse, not to connect. Of course, we respect that. We merely ask that passengers keep personal expressions low-key, especially here in premium cabins. Cloaked in official language, her words had a faint but definite sting. A woman across the aisle raised her eyes, subtly eavesdropping. A man a couple rows back slipped out one earbud. The mood had shifted, an uncomfortable ripple now noticeable, quiet yet charged. Leonardo's voice remained measured. With all respect, I think I'm being singled out. Carla blinked. Excuse me? If someone else wore a pendant shaped like a tree, a star, or a gemstone, would you ask them to conceal it? She opened her mouth, then closed it, recalibrating. That's not what this is about. So, what is it about? Silence. She didn't answer. Clearing her throat, she offered a small nod and said, I'll give you a moment. Leonardo looked up again, more slowly this time. This necklace has saved my life more than once, during conflicts, in hospital rooms, on nights when I wasn't sure I'd see morning. His voice didn't rise, yet it filled the space like thunder in a chapel. I won't hide it, not now, not ever. For the first time, Carla's emotions were visible. Frustration and disbelief cracked the professional facade. It was just a flicker, but it was enough for everyone to notice. People started paying closer attention. A man discreetly angled his phone, camera capturing the aisle. Another person whispered to a seatmate, "Is that really Leonardo DiCaprio?" But Leonardo didn't appear to notice. He wasn't trying to cause a scene. He was simply standing firm, setting a boundary others could sense. Sensing the loss of control, Carla squared her shoulders. If you refuse, I might have to involve the captain. Leonardo met her gaze with quiet strength. Do whatever you feel is necessary, but remember, the issue isn't what's around my neck, it's what's in your eyes. A profound hush took over the cabin, as though they'd suddenly drifted into space. Even Nicole, a nearby attendant, stepped back as she felt something more than mere words, the truth behind them. Carla tried to speak, but nothing emerged. Everyone knew she had no reply. This necklace has saved my life more than once, Leonardo stated firmly, and I'm not going to hide it. Carla's professional mask began to slip, her annoyance more visible now. The plane reached cruising altitude. Outside, clouds passed by in slow formation under the wings. Inside first class, there was a restful hush, reclining seats, champagne flutes, the occasional clatter of fine cutlery. Yet one small part of the cabin radiated a different energy, an aftershock of an unexpected confrontation. Leonardo remained in his seat, calm and still, crucifix undisturbed on his chest. Carla returned, her stride now quicker and more tense. She halted by his seat, lips pressed together, face composed, yet her tone had lost its neutral veneer. Sir, I've received remarks from some of our passengers. They feel uneasy, she said, voice carefully modulated but unable to hide a sharper undertone. Leonardo regarded her calmly. Uneasy about what? Carla paused. The reason seemed so obvious, but voicing it felt awkward. About displaying ideological symbols in a shared enclosed space. We want everyone to feel comfortable. Leonardo didn't blink. A symbol of faith makes people uncomfortable? Carla drew a short breath. Try to imagine if everyone wore political buttons, religious emblems, or ideological slogans. That could create division in a space intended for unity. He leaned in slightly, voice still soft, but weighted with meaning. then maybe the problem isn't the symbol, but how people are taught to react to it. His words resonated beyond their volume. A couple in nearby seats exchanged glances. The man quietly hit the record button on his phone. Carla straightened, trying to reclaim authority through posture. "I'm just following our policies. If you refuse to comply, I may have to contact security." That got people's attention. Heads turned. A hush spread through the cabin, the kind that appears when raw authenticity intrudes on the ordinary. Leonardo didn't flinch or raise his voice. He locked eyes with Carla and said, "Alert whoever you must. But understand, the real issue isn't what's on my chest. It's what's in your perspective." Silence. Carla stared at him, caught by the mirror he held up. One not of condemnation, but of clarity. His words weren't hostile. They were simply honest. That made them sting more. Farther down the aisle, a flight attendant paused mid-duty. Several passengers quietly filmed. A few nodded to themselves, though none spoke aloud. Any separation forming now was not about beliefs, but about how people see each other. Carla stepped back, jaw tight, speechless. She didn't yet realize the tide had shifted. Leonardo refused to back down, calmly standing his ground. The atmosphere in first class had changed. An initial ripple of tension had grown stronger, more charged, the sort that makes everyone sit up, whisper less, and pay attention. Leonardo stayed still in his seat, his crucifix plainly visible and unashamed, not as a statement, but as a fundamental part of who he was. Carla positioned herself in the galley, arms crossed, jaw clenched. No longer just irritated, she was challenged. The authority she was trained to exercise felt compromised in front of the very passengers whose esteem she was meant to uphold. She felt many eyes upon her, not just Leonardo's, but her own colleagues, and, perhaps most piercingly, her own conscience. Her fingers tapped nervously on the tablet attached to her service cart. The uniform she wore felt heavier than before, tighter around the neck. Taking a measured breath, she turned sharply. "Nicole, come up front with me." The younger attendant blinked uncertainly. "Is everything all right?" Carla forced a rigid smile. "We've got a situation. I'd rather handle it by the book. Passenger in seat 2 is declining a direct request. I'm escalating." Nicole hesitated. "Is this about his necklace?" Carla didn't reply directly. "It's about precedent." Nicole followed, though she was clearly reluctant. A few rows away, several passengers pretended to be engrossed in their own screens or reading material, but their focus was elsewhere. One man by the bulkhead subtly propped his phone on the armrest, recording the scene. Carla returned to Leonardo's row, stance more rigid than before. Nicole stayed close, silent, observing. "Mr. DiCaprio," Carla said, louder now that she realized who he was. "I am notifying the captain. If you refuse to respect cabin guidelines, we might have to take further steps, even involving airport security after landing." Leonardo turned his gaze slowly toward her, unfazed at being admonished over a necklace. Carla's voice rang with official fervor, but it sounded hollow in the near-silent cabin. People noticed the unfolding tension, no shouting, just an intensifying standoff over something that clearly mattered. Nicole softly interjected, "Maybe we should speak with the captain together before letting this escalate further?" Carla gave her a sharp, disapproving look, but the moment had shifted. Carla was trying to assert her power, only to reveal it was slipping away. 5 minutes later, the cockpit door opened and Captain Morales stepped out. He was in his mid-50s, face lined but kind. He moved deliberately, exuding an unforced calm that often comes from long years of leadership. Upon reaching the galley, Carla approached him, words tumbling out quickly. "Captain, we have a passenger not following standard decorum. I've requested multiple times that he conceal a religious item that might cause discomfort among other travelers, and he's refused. He has escalated the matter." Morales heard her out, then looked to Nicole. "Your perspective?" Nicole paused. "He's quiet and respectful. He didn't escalate anything. He just won't hide his necklace." Morales nodded thoughtfully, then went down the aisle as all eyes followed. Approaching Leonardo, he spoke with the calm manner of a professor guiding a thoughtful student. "Mr. DiCaprio, I'm Captain Morales. I understand there's been an issue regarding one of our policies. My priority is everyone's well-being, both crew and passengers." Could you share your side of things? Leonardo looked up, expression composed, voice steady. Your attendant asked me to hide this, he said, touching the cross gently, because she thought it might make others uncomfortable. I declined. I explained that this crucifix has been a constant in my life for years, not an ideological symbol, but a mark of survival and faith that kept me going when nothing else would. I don't wear it to provoke anyone. I wear it to remember I'm still here. A hush fell over the first-class cabin, so complete that they could almost hear someone's seatbelt clicking a few rows away. Captain Morales listened carefully. When Leonardo finished, the captain took a moment before responding. Then he turned to Carla, voice quiet but firm. Did he speak to you in a disrespectful manner? Carla opened her mouth but didn't form any words. He switched his focus to Nicole. Anything aggressive? Nicole shook her head. No, sir. Captain Morales exhaled, the weight of responsibility visible in how he chose his words next. Meanwhile, back in the rear of the aircraft, Carla stood behind the curtain, phone vibrating constantly in her pocket. She didn't need to look at it to know that a video of her confrontation with Leonardo DiCaprio was already spiraling across social media. It showed her voice, her stance, the very moment she insisted he hide his crucifix. Her chest tightened with a deeper feeling than mere panic. Shame. Not primarily because of the backlash, but because she could see it now from everyone else's point of view. Nicole's, the passengers, Leonardo's. She'd never truly been neutral or fair. She had judged him, politely and professionally, which only intensified her regret. A memory came to her, her grandmother's gentle voice, reminding her that kindness isn't merely about words, but about what you choose not to hide. Carla realized she'd spent so long hiding behind regulations, protocol, and control that she had forgotten how to see people clearly. The cockpit speaker crackled to life, and Captain Morales' voice resonated through the cabin. This airline is committed to respect, inclusivity, and the freedom to express one's beliefs without fear or shame. It was understated, but the meaning was obvious to everyone. Leonardo sat quietly in seat 2A, the crucifix still out in the open. He had neither gloated nor retaliated, which somehow carried more impact than if he had. Carla wiped her eyes, taking an unsteady breath. She wasn't sure what she'd say next, but she knew she had to address it. Stepping out from behind the galley curtain, she made her way forward, the aisle suddenly seeming twice as long as usual. Lights reflected off immaculate seats and watchful faces. As she neared Leonardo, the cabin hushed. He regarded her calmly, just as he had before. She stood in front of him, speechless at first, and allowed her actions to speak for her. Slowly, she sank to her knees. Audible gasps rippled around them. "I was wrong," she said in a trembling voice. "I told myself I was protecting the flight, being professional, but I was just protecting my own discomfort." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I've been hiding behind neutrality my entire life, believing it made me strong, but it only made me blind." She lifted her gaze. "I'm sorry." Leonardo was silent for a moment before rising from his seat and extending a hand to help her up. The applause that erupted soon died down, leaving a moment of vulnerable quiet. Carla stood before him, shaken yet transformed, more open than she'd felt since donning the uniform. She felt exposed but unexpectedly lighter. Leonardo's hand rested in hers, not to prove a point, but simply to be there. Her voice was a hushed confession. "I don't know how to fix what I did." Leonardo offered her a kind look. "You don't have to fix it," he said gently, releasing her hand. "Facing it is more than most people manage." She blinked, noticing how silent the cabin still was. But the passengers weren't judging her anymore. They looked moved. Leonardo gestured to the seat next to him. "Sit, if you want." Carla nodded and sank down. The rigid performance was gone. In its place was a raw honesty. "I used to believe in something," she whispered. "Before this job, these rules, and all the fear." Headlines would soon appear. Leonardo DiCaprio chooses compassion over conflict. Quiet faith, loud truth. Flight attendant apologizes mid-air as the world watches. But Carla no longer cared about public opinion. Something deeper had shifted within her. 2 weeks later, soft daylight bathed a modest apartment. Carla positioned her phone to record a video. She wore no makeup or uniform, just a simple t-shirt. In her hand was the small silver cross that Leonardo had given her after the flight, the very one he'd worn through it all. She looked into the camera. "For years, I believed being professional meant hiding who I was," she said, glancing at the crucifix. "But this reminded me what it truly means to be human." She smiled. "I don't hide anymore." Pausing, she added, "Thank you, Leonardo." Ending the recording, she sat quietly, still holding the cross, not as a religious emblem, but as a symbol of bravery, compassion, and the power of choosing kindness over control.